Good morning. I'm Steve Philp, your host today from Portugal Pathways, and it's my pleasure to guide you through today's panel discussion around this new report launched today on Portugal's thriving real estate market, courtesy of international research company Property Market Index. Before we dive in, let me introduce Property Market Index, a renowned real estate research company behind the international report we're discussing today. They're experts in producing real estate trends, analysis and forecasts, and are perfectly positioned to share their new findings about Portugal's property hotspots. As many of you might be aware, Portugal's appeal to international investors and affluent expats has been increasing. And today we'll discover from our expert panelists why Portugal is proving to be such an attractive place to live as well as make or manage investments. This is in no small part due to its low tax rates offered under its non-habitual residency tax regime. So I'll invite all of the panelists to turn their microphones and their cameras on. And I'd like to welcome them. We are joined by an esteemed panel today. We'll start with Paul Stannard. Paul is the non-exec chairman at Property Market Index. And joining Paul, we have Olivia Wingrove and Ollie DeCuna from LGT Wealth Management. LGT specialise in assisting high net worth expats in maximising their investments through regulated independent financial advisors, or IFAs for short, and they're based in Portugal. Alongside Olivia and Ollie, we have Anne Brightman. Anne is a CEO and founder of the Brightman Group, a boutique real estate agency with offices near Lisbon and the Algarve. Anne brings a wealth of experience in international real estates from the US and applied best practice and decades of experience to the Portuguese real estate market. And finally, we have David Vacani. David is chairman of the Federation of European Independent Financial Advisors and owner of Beacon Global. He is an expert in advising affluent expats and high net worth families managing their wealth as residents and investments. He has decades of experience and as an expert in international cross-border investment and wealth management. Before we hear a little bit more from each of our panelists, I just want to say a few things. Today's webinar is being recorded, and both the recording and the Portugal Property Hotspots report will be available after the webinar. And I'd really encourage everybody here to share their thoughts and comments and questions in the chat as we have a Q&A segment towards the end of today's event. Now, let's hear from Ollie and Olivia about the organisation and all the things that LGT do. Olivia.
Everyone, thank you very much for having me on this webinar. So in terms of what we do at LGT, we're a wealth manager. We look after money on behalf of private clients and financial advisors. And in terms of what I do specifically, I work on our intermediary investment services team. So we're running model portfolios, whether that's your standard traditional range of risk profiles, or your sustainable portfolios as well. And we offer these in a range of currencies, sterling, euro, dollar, and we also
Como fazer hotspot?
a range of jurisdictions.
Okay, peraí, deixa eu entrar.
But I'll let Ollie talk about what he does more specifically.
Connections, mobile network.
Lovely, thank you very much, Olivia.
Okay.
David.
Mobile hotspot.
Oh,
Okay.
Anne, Anne, could you turn your microphone to mute, please, if you don't mind?
Can you turn your microphone? You're talking over the speakers.
Como chama? Galaxy Note 10 FB9B.
Well, we'll just carry on. If Anne can hear us, if you wouldn't mind just muting, that would be really helpful. Next panelist, we have Paul Stannard. We'll hear from Paul a bit later. Paul is the non-exec chairman from Property Market Index, We're really looking forward to obviously hearing the key findings from their latest report. We're also delighted to have Anne Brightman of the Brightman Group to give her unique perspective on what she's been seeing and how this correlates with today's report. Anne has unfortunately just left us. I think she's having a few issues with her connection. Hopefully Anne will rejoin us in a few minutes, and we'll get to hear from her. Lastly, I'd like to introduce David. David, please tell us a little bit more about you and your dual roles, obviously as chairman of the federation and also as owner of BG.
Thanks, Steve. I live in Portugal, resident in Portugal, have been for a number of years now, and we've worked there for a significant amount of time. Very much looking to assist people who are moving into Portugal or who may be moving into Portugal.
No, I can't hear them.
And looking after their financial affairs, working with like-minded professionals, and really trying to source the appropriate things for individuals and clients themselves. My role as chairman of FIFA is really a labour of love. We very much like to work in a client-centric way, and a way that just is, I say, to look after clients and their good and their investments and their pensions and their wealth and their property, and getting visas and things appropriate to them. Being chairman of FIFA, it means it's an industry-wide role where we try and encourage good practice and move an industry that perhaps in the past was fairly badly received into one that's modern, free thinking, and very much there for the client's best interests. And that's how we're working with that institution.
Thank you for that, David. I think we've got Anne back. Anne, are you able to hear us? No, maybe not. So hopefully Anne will be able to join us as we move through the presentation. But we're all here to hear from Paul from the Property Market Index. He's going to give us a sneak preview on the report. So Paul, we'll get your slides loaded up and it will be over to you. So give me 2 seconds while I load the slides.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, over to you, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah. So if you could push on to the next slide. These are the intro slides. Next one, Steve. Keep going. That's it. Okay. Yeah. So we launched the report today. It's been 2.5 months of research into Portugal's property market. We do these international reports every quarter, and we pick different locations internationally that are showing material change. And the main indices and ratings are linked to regeneration investment, the growth trends that our researchers have found in terms of the markets there, and how culture, education, heritage, as well as investment potential play a part, land availability, infrastructure, connectivity, and the amenities, as well as health and well-being and sustainability and security. And Portugal has rated very highly on all of these metrics, not just in the last year, but over the last 10 years, really, and beyond, since it introduced the non-habitual residency scheme, the golden visa scheme for residency, as well as the D7 passive income residency. And more recently, obviously, there's been a big upsurge in digital nomads and professionals coming to Portugal, which is all those impacts are having a major effect on the property market there. And the market itself during 2023 was, as the whole country, was up 6.7%, year on year. But in some of these areas like the Algarve, we're seeing increases upwards of 15%, and also around Lisbon and some of the surrounding areas like Sintra and Comporta, and more north of that, the Silver Coast, which traditionally has been less populated, but is now starting to rise up through the market. A lot of because of what's happened with the surfing community there, it's become a very trendy and place that people really want to engage with. And then in the north, Porto and some of its districts, as well as Braga, which is about 20 minutes north, have also seen significant growth in value, and all driven by regeneration, culture, education, the investment, and infrastructure. So taking Braga, for instance, in the north, over 15 years ago, the government in Portugal and the King of Spain invested over 250 million in a nanotechnology centre there. And Braga has become an academic hub, and a lot of professional people have moved there, and that's having a big impact on that market. So they're examples of technology having an impact. Similar things have happened in Lisbon. And then obviously the NHR scheme offers these significant tax advantages for up to 10 years, which are also impacting. One other major fact, Steve, if you could go on to the next slide, is the fact that during our research through the statistics from the National Institute in Portugal, it's seen that for every 10 properties sold in Portugal in the last 12 months, only one was built, which obviously also has a impact on driving demand over supply. But I'm sure Anne can probably talk about some of the developments that are going on across the country. But there's more of that in our report. Another thing that's driving things has been a strong exchange rates, particularly with places like the US. For several years, there was a very strong situation going on with cost of living in America, safety and security. So America, the UK, even Canada now, and South Africa, as well as what you would expect in terms of Brazil because of its Portuguese heritage, are also driving a lot of wealth into the country, which is also having an impact on property prices. And with a brilliant climate and 300 days of sunshine, all of these things have a big impact. And there's more detail in the report that you can read in full. Steve, the next slide.
Talvez. I don't.
Yeah.
Yes.
So to summarise, there's been 6.5% growth in the last 12 months. In fact, that's 6.7 now going into October. Algarve has seen real estate values in some of the prime locations at over 15%, and some of the areas that have really shone out in this report are listed below, in terms of Lisbon, Comporta, Estoril, Sintra, the Silver Coast, Braga, and obviously the Algarve. And obviously that 10 houses sold for every one built is a big impact. And our forecasts and predictions are that for the next 2 or 3 years, Portugal will continue on this path of increases in property prices because of many of the factors that we've talked about. But it's not just about foreign money coming in investments, because the population for expats and foreign residents is still only 7% of the total population. So it's having an overall impact on the whole market. So Steve. over to you. You're on mute, Steve. Steve, you're on mute.
Hopefully you can hear us. I'm having some issues with my sound. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. Really interesting and great insight. We starting to have some questions obviously coming in from the chat. Before we get to those, I have a question that I'd like to pose to the panel. Obviously, we've seen sort of huge increases and in popularity and the positive impact that that's had on the real estate market in Portugal. But taking into consideration that this year we've seen golden visas potentially reach a record number, what impact do you feel that the golden visas, as they obviously gain popularity, what impact do you think they will have on the real estate market in the coming year? Let's start with Paul on that. What are your thoughts, Paul, with regards to that? You're on mute, Paul. Still on mute, Paul.
Can everyone hear now?
No.
Yeah,
so Steve, the golden visa is not the main driver because obviously the golden visa is now under review, and it's very much the non-habitual residency tax regime that has the biggest impact. And I'm sure David and the rest of the panel can talk about that in more detail. But in terms of all of the visas that are available, it seems that Portugal is just becoming more and more attractive, and people are not moving there just because of the tax reasons, because they wouldn't do that. It's lifestyle, it's all these other things. And there was a report out earlier this week that indicated that Portugal was now the #1 country in the world for retirement. And a lot of that's about security, about way of life, the culture, the food, the weather, and obviously the other incentives that the government have offered through their non-habitual residency program and their various visa programs are impacting that.
Thanks for that, Paul. David,
I think it's absolutely valid. And that's something we have seen where people are seeing a lovely way of life, lovely climate throughout the country from north to south, and lovely areas like Cascais and near Lisbon. Certainly seems to be that the property market is very stable. Lovely property. I mean, as we would always say to people, you've kind of got to live where you want to live, and not just be somewhere just for tax purposes. You've got to enjoy your lifestyle and the things you like. And I think Paul makes the comment, 300 days of sunshine goes a long way. But certainly there have been some changes in the visa types over the last few months. The golden visa situation very well documented. And I think that's actually very sensible in itself. But certainly in terms of what we're seeing, that is exactly the case. And Paul makes very valid comments there about the whole property situation, the whole property market.
And Ollie, would you concur with that? Has that been your experience?
Standpoint, clients are very internationally mobile these days, so they are obviously open-minded to geography. So if you can work with a good advisor I think can walk you through, the tax side and actually ease, the burden on potentially moving or geography, then actually that makes Portugal very attractive.
Great. I would like to apologise to the audience. We seem to have some issues with regards to connectivity. Looks like we've lost Paul and Anne, but obviously we'll soldier on, and hopefully those guys will come back and join us. So as I said, we've got a number of questions now coming in from the audience. We also had a number of questions that were sort of preset when a lot of the audience registered. Had lots of questions. So I've got a question here that I'm going to put to David initially, and it's from Mandy Hoffman from San Francisco. And she's sort of suggesting, or she's wondering if this has as much to do as the lifestyle in Portugal as well as the investment incentives. Obviously, Mandy's obviously considering this as an option. So, David, do you think it's someone who actually lives in Portugal and has made that transition?
I think you have to. I go back to kind of what we just said just now. Is I think you have, if you find somewhere you like, in Europe, some people like France, some people like Spain, Italy. Some prefer further east and south in Cyprus and Malta. There are other places that people will go. Portugal, from a lifestyle of sort of family, has always been somewhere we've always liked, always loved, and if there are, and I think from a long-standing cultural place, Lisbon's one of the great cities of the world. It's a wonderful place. Ever increasing good communications as well, with a view there to San Francisco. It's very easy now. I have a number of friends with family in the US, whether they are expats or actually Americans, and they very easily now can get to the US from Lisbon. So sort of communications are much better with the States as well. So from that perspective, and getting around is easy. And of course, we have the love of something like Zoom and Teams now, which makes it, apart from the occasional technical glitch, makes life a lot easier as well. But certainly, we are seeing a increasing number of US citizens moving to Portugal and finding residency there. Now, I was on a plane fairly recently. There's a little late hopper that goes down from Lisbon to Faro, and it was very late in the evening. I would normally drive, but it was and there were sort of 10 Americans on the flight, a couple of guys from South Africa, and only one Brit and a couple of Portuguese. So I think that there were certainly lots of Americans having a look around at the place at that point.
And I'm presuming, Olivia, that obviously the Portuguese lifestyle, it is attractive, and it makes your job a lot easier as well when presenting also as investment opportunities.
I mean, certainly we're doing a lot more work out in Portugal now. I've been twice already so far this year and going again in a few weeks. Certainly a big opportunity set there. A lot of financial advisors based out there, and increasingly so many more clients.
Okay. Ollie, we've got another question that came in from Brian Court, and again he's looking outside of real estate, and these questions outside of real estate, how do you see the traditional private security market performing? Now, he's read that the US is looking strong, coming out of a high period of inflation, but at places like the UK haven't invested in infrastructure or high value professions. So what does that look like from an investment point of view mixed with real estate?
Yeah, I think from our investment standpoint, we very much look at the global equity market, and we'll look at all asset classes, but we generally look at listed assets. So, your private assets such as property and real estate would very much sit outside of our remit. But at the moment, the global economy is very much looking at the inflation story. It continues to, tick on, as it were. We've definitely been in this zone of higher interest rates for a longer period of time, and the market's currently going through an adjustment where central banks are indicating that we will be in a bit of elevated interest rates for a bit longer still. So, with regards to the way we approach managing money is really we work closely with the likes of David to really understand the individual client's objectives, because it's very much down to their personal appetite, their personal journey. what their time horizon is, and this will very much guide how we will invest at that time. So unfortunately on the investment side, it's not a sort of one size fits all, but there are opportunities across all asset classes at the moment. That's from private equity, through to listed equities. You've got a long time horizon, but equally for the first time in probably a decade, cash and fixed income is throwing up, good low risk returns. You can get 5% off the asset class. So it really does come down to the individual.
David,
I think that's absolutely
anything
wise, and I think that's very sensible. It's all about diversification of assets, and I mean, obviously, we're talking very much about property on this this webinar, and how well that has performed and is performing in Portugal. But Ollie makes a very wise point there about spreading assets, spreading risks, and having a sort of broadly diversified and properly managed portfolio. We've seen over many years of doing working in this this role. Generally, if it is too good to be true, it looks too good to be true. It generally is, and you need to have good, solid, proper investment management. And each person is different as well, Steve. I think that's very important. There'll be investors, people that come to Portugal for reasons of sort of property and to build property businesses. There are other people there just to build a house, other people to renovate a house, and other people there to go and have lovely lunches and really enjoy themselves. And I think it's tying all that in with a sound long-term investment policy with sort of active work and management. That's absolutely critical for everybody.
Unfortunately, obviously, we seem to have lost Anne and Paul, and a number of questions have come in from the audience around, obviously, some of the up and coming places within Portugal. So I don't know whether, David, you've got any thoughts on that in terms of, what are the sort of up and coming places in Portugal?
Yeah.
Paul mentioned a few of them, but for someone who
I think very much we've talked to a number of people who are looking at places like Comporta, which is very much in is somewhere which is up sort of south of Lisbon. That's a very much growing area. Some significant investment has gone in there in terms of golf, which obviously Portugal is a real golfing hub, and a couple of wonderful golf courses, which I've yet been unable to visit so far, but they've just been opened. And obviously those areas like Cascais and the Algarve itself are very well researched, and many people live there. But we are seeing an increasing number of people moving to places like Porto, where obviously the climate's different, function's different, but an increasing number of people there, people like the Douro area. So definitely some other places now which are getting some traction. I mentioned Comporta deliberately, that we're aware of a number of people we're working with who are looking at that area and that region. And I say further up Silver Coast and up towards sort of Porto, Braga again. I think people going to Portugal because they do like the lifestyle. Everyone has a different, that might be a different thing, but it is rather a wonderful country. And it's not just golf and tennis, shall we say. So I think there is quite a significant change in what we're also doing. I think seeing with modern technology is a lot more tech type people moving in and being able to work in different parts of Portugal and run their businesses from there, and able to, as I say, people are able to commute easier now. So we're definitely seeing that. But certainly Comporta area and the like, we're seeing very much that sort of area where people are going to.
Thank you for that. Just moving on, because we've got a few more questions to get to before we sort of reach the hour mark. We've had a question coming from Rita, and I'm going to put this one to you initially, Ollie, and David can come in behind you. So Rita is saying that she's got a large pension in the UK, and she doesn't know whether to take her tax-free lump sum and invest it in something long-term that is advantageous with her NHR tax.
You want me to
status.
jump in first there, Ollie, and then I'll let you.
You go first.
I think
I mean, the answer is again very much each person is individual. If the person is typically in the UK and has not taken their tax-free cash and is looking to do so, it is normally wise to do so before you go to Portugal, because you have a tax-free amount of money that you can take. Obviously, under NHR, you can take pension income for 10 years taxed at 10%. That rules changed fairly a couple of years ago. So it's very much look at the individual situation and what are you looking to do, whether it's buy property, obviously, or invest that money for longer term income. The critical thing here in Portugal is to really work at the 10-year non-habitual residency is wonderful in terms of taking dividends and in terms of taking pensions, but it needs to be borne in mind that if you want to be there after 10 years, you need to get yourself structured properly for, year 11, basically onwards. So absolutely important to assess, very important to look at what your actual underlying goals are. But in broad terms, that's how you need to have a look at it and work out what's best for you, for what you as an individual want to do first.
Ollie, have you anything to come in behind that?
I think the key thing is working with an advisor to have a long-term plan, because you may have a very strong conviction on a property that you would like to purchase, and then that means that working with an advisor, you can facilitate that by maybe a tax-efficient release from your pension scheme. But really, it's looking at the strategy in the round and doing the sort of cash flow modelling just to make sure that actually it is right for you over that journey, and that actually maybe taking a large amount out of the pension isn't the right thing to do, because you could be going backwards and actually you may not leave yourself enough means for retirement. So I think the important thing is that cash flow aspect, and really work through it with an advisor.
Brilliant. Oh, I think we've got Anne back now. Anne, you're back, but you are on mute. So if you want to unmute yourself, we can see you. If you'd like to unmute, and we can bring you back in. You need to unmute it. Okay, so Anne still seems to be having a few little issues there. Going back to some of the questions that we've got coming in on the chat, we'll go to Irene, and she's asking, are international enterprises and emerging tech companies contributing to, obviously, the contributing to the increase?
I think obviously the answer short term is yes. There is a growing tech business, and we'll know more about the property market than me and Paul will, but there certainly is definitely an assistance to the property market via that route, and it's becoming quite a tech capital, the Lisbon area, and I suspect that will grow out from the Lisbon area as well. But yeah, I think that's certainly seeing some. We're seeing some. That's definitely having an effect, shall we say? I wouldn't know how much, but it's definitely having an effect.
Okay, thank you. And we've got Paul back in the room as well. So everyone's joined us back. Paul, can you hear us?
I can. I could hear all you, but obviously it wasn't letting me play ball. But I'm here now.
You're here now, which is a good thing. So, Paul, a number of questions have come in sort of directly related to, obviously, your report. So again, we had a question from Andrea Smith from London, which you could take for me. And she's asking, has this new report highlighted the regions in Portugal that are booming in terms of real estate growth?
Yeah, I mean, it's all highlighted in the report, and we've highlighted about a dozen areas. Half a dozen of those are in the Algarve, so Quinta-Lago, Valdelobo, places like Beniguil, but also in and around Lisbon. So obviously, David has already talked about Comporta, but Sintra and places like that. A lot of those areas, Estoril, Cascais, all of those have completely outperformed the market, not just in Portugal but internationally. It's actually quite incredible in a market that is, due to interest rates and inflation, Portugal is outperforming in many of these enclaves that I talked about. And Anne might be able to come in on that behind. I know she's on mute, but she can't talk.
I think Anne's still having some, unless you can use.
Yeah, maybe she can nod in agreement. Maybe she can nod in agreement.
Yeah. Okay. So Paul, again, just sort of advancing that on, a question that's coming from Peter Harmon. He's asking what's the percentage of British and American expats investing in Portuguese properties in the past year? He suspects it's going to be big.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have that exact detail and data, but I can tell you anecdotally that the US, through our research, was high, as was Canada and the UK. And UK obviously had the Brexit challenge. Now it has the inflationary challenges, and getting that under control, as well as interest rates. So, yeah, there's still a big influx of wealthy millionaires that are coming from those countries. And obviously, Brazil, with its links to Portugal anyway, is very strong, as is Canada. And places like South Africa, for security reasons and safety and having that quality of life, that talks to a lot of those places. And that's what's driving it.
Okay. And then just finally, Paul, based on the report, again, George, who's based out of Lisbon, he's sort of asking, with regards to the current trends, where do you think that the Portuguese property landscape will be in the next 3 years?
Well, because of the supply and demand challenge, obviously there are new developments coming through. There's a lot of big investments, property investment funds that are coming through as well. So, it's going to be strong because NHR, because of the quality of life, because of the tax regime, and that safety and security. And you can't underestimate what a beautiful place in terms of it is to live, enjoy the culture. I mean, Dave can talk firsthand, but I've been out there a lot in the last few years, but definitely over the last 3 months, and you can see that there's an underlying vibe, whether it's Lisbon, whether it's Porto, whether it's Quinta it's just, you can tell that this market is going to continue on its trajectory for the next 3 years, at least.
So, David, anything to add? Anything come behind Paul on that particular point with regards to where you're thinking in the next 3 years, in particular, how that landscape?
I think that the market, shall we say, in certainly it's like in Cascais, Quinta do Lago, Valdelobo, it's fairly well. People are fairly well sort of aware of what's been going on there. I think you basically often see now people looking. Certainly in the Algarve, people are moving, should we say, slightly more up into the hills and to the hills behind. Because you get great views, wonderful, and you can actually get a bit of a breeze sometime. So people very much looking at where they can feel very comfortable. I think as I say, we are seeing a number of people now moving to the Porto type area, where again, very different climate, different place. Porto is a beautiful city. If anyone who's on this call has not been there, I would thoroughly recommend it. It's a beautiful place. But as I say, I think it's finding what you really want. It's a wonderful old country with a deep history, wonderful wine, wonderful sport. So we're seeing people move there for a number of different reasons, not just because they want to go and have a nice tennis and golf holiday, as we said earlier on. But and I think Lisbon's obviously a wonderful city. So certainly areas that I say we're seeing, say, two particular places that we've seen quite significant activity, and people moving to to Porto and to the sort of Comporta type area, and then obviously still into the sort of, should we say, some of the favoured areas, and also Western Algarve now as well, sort of off down towards Corvero, Benagil, and Lagos and places like that. So certainly seeing quite a broad thing, people kind of moving there to, once they find what they're really looking for.
Great. So we've heard a lot about, a lot of the positives and how the property market is booming, and obviously the influx of expats. A question from Katie. So she's just wondering, what are the potential challenges in the Portuguese property market? And I'll start with Paul on that one.
Not to interrupt, but can you hear?
Yes, we can hear you, Anne.
I'm not back. I'm on, finally. I really apologize. We've been having major technical difficulties with the network, and I had to change agencies, actually. So I'm in another office.
That's great.
Yeah,
Well,
maybe, Anne, you can pick up on that in terms of the developments around regeneration. You was telling me on our pre-call last week that there's a lot of new developments and regeneration going on around the areas that you serve.
Yes, particularly in the Algarve, that's true. There are multi-generational developments that have already begun construction. There are mixed-use developments, commercial and residential, but we see that trend throughout Portugal. It's particularly strong in the Algarve, but in the northern areas also as well. Porto, Braga is an area that's really booming right now. What's happening though with these developments is that it takes on average 3 to 5 years to get permits to begin construction. So it's backlogged, and this has really created a shortage in the inventory that we have right now. And this, of course, affects pricing. I apologize if I'm repeating something that you all have already discussed, but I wasn't able to hear all of it.
So just following on from that, Anne, a question from Liz, and this one again is sort of directed at you, really. So do you know of any infrastructure or regeneration projects that are in the pipeline that might influence the property interests in specific regions?
Yes, most definitely. We have one that will be getting pre-sales the end of November. That is, it's a really interesting project because it's created around a Swiss anti-aging and longevity clinic that will sort of be the foundation of this multi-generational project development that's going up, and it's very close to Lisbon. It's about 20 minutes from the bridge, and I think this is going to be a benchmark in that type of property because it will have golf course, paddle courts, tennis courts, and of course the overall theme is going to be wellness and healthy lifestyle, which I think Portugal is very well positioned to advance with.
Absolutely.
And on that point, obviously there's a new airport going into Lisbon.
Yes.
We've seen from many of our other reports, like the UK, when HS1 came to town and what it did for some of the Kent towns there. Do you see, is that development close to where the airport will be? Is it?
Yeah, well, that's one of the big advantages of developments in this area because it has not been 100% approved, but the new airport is slated to be built on the other side of the bridge, and that will, of course, completely change the dynamics of that area and really make prices go up in value.
Sure. So going back, I think just before you joined, got back to us, Anne, Katie Frank in our audience, she was asking, obviously, were there any potential challenges to the Portuguese property market that you can see in the next sort of coming years? It's obviously it's going one way, but are there any challenges? Are there any things that people should be aware of?
Well, unquestionably, the greatest challenge right now is the shortage of inventory. There, especially in the higher end sector of the market, and we're seeing that across the country, with the exception of the interior, because with the change in the golden visa regulations, I think what they're really aiming at is to push growth into lower populated areas. But they have very attractive tax incentives for investors that are coming over and want to begin developing new parts of the country. And there's some very big projects that are slated to move forward in more remote regions.
Paul,
I read recently that it may be under consideration that to help the Indigenous population and young people, that the government might consider even offering sort of property-related developments that are only available to the Indigenous population under some kind of incentive scheme. I don't know whether that will make, that will have legs, but I did read that only last week.
Well, they offer tax-wise, they offer a lot of incentives to foreigners that are coming in. We work with cross-border tax specialists that really look at the individual's situation and see how they can maximize that area. And it really needs to be looked at on a case-by-case basis. The Indigenous population benefits I'm not aware of, because I'm more focused on foreign community coming into, foreign expats coming into the market. But when you start to investigate, the government is really trying to promote immigration and development within the country.
I mean, I don't know if I missed, because I was off part of the way as well, and I had a connection issue, but I wonder if the team from LGT spoke earlier about any other sort of bigger issues in terms of the international market. Where is the US market going? Where's the UK market? How does Europe then play into that? I'd be fascinated to hear from them their view of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I think this is really all about interest rate policy. The US continues to lead the way, both with regards to the technology companies and evolution there. I think what's particularly interesting is that in a higher growth environment, when interest rates started going up, what is now referred to as the sort of Magnificent Seven, so the likes of Amazon and Alphabet, Nvidia, these sorts of companies very much were seen unfavorably, because they were seen to be future growth companies. They now have so much cash on their balance sheets in a higher interest rate environment, they're actually performing exceptionally well. So I think the key thing is need to be mindful that the markets can be very fickle. European interest rates and inflation actually seems to be trending in the right direction, which is definitely a positive. I think there are areas like the UK where there's still a lot of uncertainty, and we must be mindful that we have a number of elections coming up, both UK and in the US, and this can have a big impact on the markets. So all these things tend to be quite short term. Human psychology is, you look at what's going on day to day, but it really comes back to actually thinking about the long-term plan, because as we've all seen, we've all invested through several cycles, and what feels like a hugely dramatic event at the time actually tends to be a bit of a blip within your longer-term plan.
Great. Thank you for that. We're sort of nearing the hour mark. We can probably just get one more question in, and this one's from Jacques in Johannesburg, and he's saying that he hears that Portugal has got a great reputation for safety and sustainability, and again he's just inquiring: are there certain locations seeing an increase in demand due to these factors? So, David, have you seen
I
that
think
at
the
all
country
in
is very
terms of-
much, and Anne will probably have a better view of this than I will, but I certainly see that. And from traveling between Lisbon, the Algarve, and around, I'm certainly seeing that, and I think it has, and that's obviously very important. And I think it's great policy what the country is doing. But I say Anne might be more specific on places and things, but absolutely 100% we're seeing that, and certainly the whole safety aspect is really important as far as we can see.
I completely agree with you, David. I see that with our clients that are coming in, there are whole populations that is probably their number one reason for looking at Portugal, because Portugal, you may have mentioned this before, but Portugal is number 6 on the World Peace Index, and that's becoming ever more important globally. We see that as a main factor of why Brazilians are choosing Portugal. We see that as a main factor of why South Africans are choosing Portugal. We see that as a factor in why that Turkish community is looking at Portugal. So definitely it's influencing this migration into Portugal.
And Paul, and you
Yeah,
sort of,
people want to invest in safe places. It's always been us. And very clear. You know, that report that came out last week about Portugal being the best place in the world to retire or have residency. If you look at all the macro and micro factors, they're all around safety, security, way of life, culture, well-being, and it features high on all of those charts. And then you add in the tax incentives and the residency schemes. It's very compelling.
brilliant. Well, thank you for that. As I said, we're sort of approaching the hour mark, and I'm conscious that the audience and you guys on the panel have got busy days ahead of you. So I'd like to thank, obviously, the audience primarily for their questions and their engagement, and obviously thank the panelists for their valuable insight. And I'm very pleased that Anne and Paul both managed to get back on in the end. Well persevered. So clearly the Portuguese lifestyle, NHR, supply and demand are continuing to fuel Portugal's investment potential for the next years and beyond that. I'd just like to invite each of the panelists just to wrap up, just sort of one takeaway or one thought that they could leave with the audience today. So again, starting with you, David, what sort of takeaway?
I thought you'd come to me first. Thanks for that. No, I think very much it is. It needs to be what's right for the individual rather than squeezed into a certain a basket. So it's very much, if you're moving to Portugal or considering moving to Portugal, look at the different areas, look at what your key motivators are and your key drivers are. I don't want to talk about property because Anne and Paul know a lot more about property than I do. But it's very much make decision based on what you want to achieve, and then really think about your planning and what you're trying to do for the long term, and very much, as Ollie said, work with professional people to do so. There's some really good people out there, highly qualified professionals, people like Anne. And ourselves and others as well. So work very much with professionals and get yourself properly sorted out. Once you decide to move to Portugal, you've got to start thinking Portuguese and think how the Portuguese work in Portugal. You can't just be an expat or someone jumping around from one to one. You need to think like a local person, and I'd say that's the key thing in your planning.
Thanks, sir. Anne?
Well, first of all, I didn't really have an opportunity to introduce myself, so I will take just a second to say that I'm Anne Brightman. I'm founder and CEO of the Brightman Group, and Brightman Group is a boutique investment and residential real estate agency, and we're very focused on offering our clients a smooth and seamless experience when they're buying property in Portugal. And my big takeaway from this would be based on the world's best places to retire in Portugal. And if you covered this, I apologize, but I would like to just reinforce the cost of living in comparison to other European countries is very reasonable. We have a great climate, especially compared to these super hot places that we've seen reach record highs over the last summer in the United States, Canada, Brazil even. It has affordable quality healthcare. I'm not sure if you all talked about this, but this for me was a huge point in evaluating the optimal place to move to. Healthcare compared to what I was paying in the US is minimal. Safety, which we mentioned, is a key factor. And something that may not have been mentioned is that Portugal has a very large English-speaking population and a foreign community that really makes settling in a lot easier and faster. So if somebody is interested in talking about property or wants referrals for additional information, I would welcome your requests and contact.
Thank you for that, Anne. Ollie.
I think, my position is very much aligned with what David was saying. The key thing is think about your position in the round. I think making an international move historically has always been quite intimidating. But actually, people are very mobile. I said this at the beginning of the call. And actually, if you have the right team around you, you can really actually make that move quite stress-free.
Thank you for that. And we'll finish with Paul, whose report obviously kicked all this off.
Yeah, I mean, if we all go back to pre-COVID, my team were working internationally, remotely before Zoom was a phenomenon. And we all do work more remotely, and we can research these things and we can plan. And what I've heard from the panel and what I've learned in my own life, if you plan early, you talk to the right people and you do your research, you can really enrich your life through your investments, whether it be property, tech, whatever it is, and having that mixed portfolio. But you can now then combine that with a wonderful life in places like Portugal. And so, yeah, that would be my takeaway.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for your time and those wise words at the end there. And again, I'll just like to extend thanks to the audience. Really engaged, lots of great questions. If we didn't get around to answering them, we'll do our best to answer them after the webinar and get back to you. Just to let you know again that a watch back recording of the webinar, along with a copy of the Portugal Property Hotspots report, will be sent to everybody within the next 24 hours. If in the meantime you'd like to reach out with a question or simply want to contact us, please visit our website, which is www.portugalpathways.io. And just finally, our next webinar, which is on the 24th of October, we'll be delving into the Wealthy Expats in Portugal Survey Report 2023. Some really interesting insight for that one. And to stay updated with that, again, check out our website, which you've seen earlier. And it just leaves me to say thank you very much to our panelists. Thank you very much to the audience. Until next time, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.